Today we're doing a chemistry experiment in the shop. This is kind of a magical elixir that I use for a lot of different things in the wood shop. If you want to learn more, stick around and let's get into the details.
Welcome back to the Turning Stitches Wood Shop. I'm Sean. Today I want to answer a few questions about my finishing process. And in that, I want to dive into probably one of the most versatile finishing products that I use in the shop, and that's shellac. So I use shellac for a lot of different things. It is oftentimes on a natural bowl like this one. It is oftentimes kind of the first thing that I apply, and we'll talk about why I do that. A lot of times in my other turning videos, I'll kind of touch on that very briefly at the tail end of the video. And so a lot of times, because I don't go into much detail on that, I get questions on it quite a bit. So today I want to dive a little deeper into shellac and how I use it in my shop, and maybe you can adopt some of these practices in your shop as well. So I do have a couple bowls here that we'll finish here in this video. This one is a new walnut salad bowl that just came off the lathe, and then I've got this natural bowl here. So we'll apply some shellac to both of these, and you can kind of see how it works as a finish. So here's an example of how I use shellac as a sealer. So here's a spalted ash bowl that I finished some time ago, and it was cracking along a couple, at the end grain. There's part of the pith was probably right about here in the log, and so it was starting to crack along with the decay that creates the spalting. So rather than just trash this piece, a lot of people would have just trashed this piece, but I used CA glue to kind of fill the cracks and kind of stabilize those cracks. Now on this bowl, and one of the reasons I'm showing it here is I did use some blue pigment, so you can kind of see those cracks. I really kind of highlighted them as a feature. But before I did that, before I used the CA glue here, I used shellac as a sealer, and what that does is it prevents as I'm using the CA glue, a lot of times what will happen is as the glue is penetrating into the fibers on either side of the crack that you're trying to fill, it'll kind of darken those areas. So I use the shellac just as a sealer, and I'll talk about how I mix that in a moment, but I used the sealer first, and then I went back in this case and I put in the pigment, and then I put in the glue. On a bowl like this, as I'm turning it, I end up doing that multiple times, and I'll show that, maybe not this bowl specifically, but I've got some clips of using that process on other pieces. But that's one way that I use shellac as a sealer. So another way that I use shellac as a sealer is on a bowl like this. For example, this is a rough turned bowl. It's also ash, it's spalted. Now this one is a little different. I don't know if you can see, I'm going to show you the bottom of the bowl because it's most apparent. This portion, these really light pieces, and maybe you saw that splinter out a little bit right along here. This is really, really, really soft, and it's hard to tool, it's hard to sand. But one of the first things we'll do is kind of coat all of this with shellac just to try to make all of these fibers that are really open and raw. We'll definitely need to use something to kind of hold this thing together to get a nice smooth finish ultimately. When I started using shellac in the shop, I started by using the Zinsser shellac that you can find really in most any hardware store, paint store, big box store, things like that. And it worked great, and I really enjoyed using it. So then I kind of, after researching it, I switched and started using shellac in the flake form. So shellac can kind of go rancid, it can go bad. So with a pint type jar, you may or may not use all of it before it goes bad. For me, it lasted for quite a while, and I used most of it. But it's really pretty easy to mix up, and you can mix it in batches that you know you're going to use. If it does go bad, you can make more. But the other thing, too, is you can mix it in different ratios and use it for different things, which is how I use it in the shop. So when you're mixing shellac, it's always measured in a pound cut, basically. So a 2-pound cut, it would be 2 pounds of shellac flakes in 1 gallon of alcohol. So when I'm mixing shellac in the shop, I mix it in 2 different weights. I mix a 3-pound cut, and that's what we'll use to finish these bowls. And then I mix a 1 pound cut, and that's what I use as a sealer or sanding sealer. So right now I'm almost out of my 3 pound cut. I've got very little left in the jar. So let's mix up another batch. What it's telling me is I need 8 fluid ounces of alcohol, and then I need 3 ounces of flakes. So we're going to start with the flakes. So we'll measure these out. I've got a scale here. So I'm just going to pour this out until I've got 3 ounces of flakes on the scale. Whoop, there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and add my flakes to the jar. Now we're going to do our fluid ounces, kind of double check that. So this is a very simple process, not much to it. Bingo. 8 ounces, add that to the jar. Basically all I'm going to do is stir this a few times today, stir it again tomorrow. The next time we're ready to finish another bowl, we should have plenty of our 3 pound cut. So let's put a little shellac on these bowls. I always like, and this is just personal preference, I like to brush things, whether it's shellac or stains so all I did was put a little alcohol in this container. The alcohol will activate the shellac, so I have a brush that I labeled shellac. It's the only thing I use this for. Putting a little alcohol in it will kind of loosen the brushes, loosen the bristles on the brush. So I'm going to start with the outside of this bowl, and all we're going to do is brush it on and leave it on there, and then we'll flip it over and do the inside here in just a few minutes. The one thing I like about shellac, and one reason why I use it in this finishing process with a lot of my bowls and other turned pieces, is because it dries so quickly. So that's one of my favorite things about it. I love oil-based finishes. Tung oil is one of my favorites. My all-time favorite is probably General Finishes Armor Seal. And I use it a lot on, pieces, at least pieces that I find very special. I'll spend the time to use Armor Seal. The downside with Armor Seal, of course, with it being an oil-based finish, is that it takes some time to dry. And so if I've got other things I want to do in the shop, it can take a week. Being very diligent and making sure every day I'm adding more coats, it can take a week to get 4 or 5 coats onto a piece using Armor Seal and other oil-based finishes like it. What I like about shellac, and I'll show you here in just a second why I use it, is all of us, with this one coat, and it's already starting to dry, so I can already feel it's my brush is starting to pull, but we pulled those natural colors, much like an oil-based finish would, out of this piece. So we got the bottom pretty well ready to go here, and I'm going to leave this alone so I don't mess it up anymore. So I'm going to set this aside, but this is giving me that tone that I'm looking for out of this piece, and it's going to be dry here in just a few minutes. We'll be able to flip that over and do the inside. So then, as you may have seen in some of my other videos, when I'm working on a lot of other bowls and a lot of pieces, I will do the shellac step, just like we're doing here, and then let it dry, and then in the same day, I use General Finishes High Performance, and I spray that. And that allows me generally, with that process between the shellac gives me the color I want. So that's the key to the shellac, and it dries quickly. And then I can start right away building coats with the water-based urethane, which is the high performance. So on this bowl here that I'm working on, we'll have a video out on it soon, but this is a walnut bowl, salad bowl, with a maple ring. So the shellac really kind of brings out that walnut, gives us that natural kind of oil pop, if you will. A lot of people like that, oh, here's the walnut pop. So this is intended to be a salad bowl. I would envision this being used hopefully frequently in customers' kitchens. So instead of using the spray finish on the walnut salad bowl, we're going to stick with just 3 or 4 coats of shellac. So if you're a wood turner, another great use of shellac as a sanding sealer is if you use abrasive paste. So this is Yorkshire grit. I use this periodically. You can kind of see I haven't used a lot of it. There are several other brands out there. But if you're using an abrasive paste like this to kind of get that fine, smooth, finish sanding effect, you do want to apply a sanding sealer to the piece before you apply the abrasive grit and buff it off. So while we're waiting for these bowls to dry, we'll talk a minute about these flakes. So I ordered these flakes on Amazon, just a general search. These are a super blonde, de-waxed 1 pound bag is what I've got here. I don't recall exactly what I paid for it, but I believe it was about $40 or so. You can also find other colors if you are looking for different tones. So you can get garnet colors, you can get other things, but since I was using it a lot as a sealer, I really didn't want to alter the color. So just this super blonde flake does a good job of kind of bringing out some of the natural colors like an oil will without adding other colors to it. So about 10 or 15 minutes have passed and we're ready. Here's our bowl, our natural bowl, and it's pretty well dry, but we're just going to brush it on, and you can kind of see as we do that, it just brings this kind of relatively boring bowl to life. It just brings out those natural colors and the natural tones. It just kind of gives it that wet look. All right, there we go. There's coat 1 done for this bowl. So let's grab our walnut salad bowl here. Now on this one, let's talk a little bit about why we're using shellac, and we're not spraying this bowl. We're going to just use shellac on this bowl. Well, one, shellac's a natural product. It's very food safe. All wood finishes are food safe after they've cured. I mimicked basically a Tupperware bowl you've got in the kitchen. That's how I basically sized it and everything to be a effective salad bowl. But I would imagine this one will get a lot more use in a kitchen than the other bowl. And with that, what I wanted to do was not only have a food safe bowl, of course, but also have it to where if over time the finish needed to be refreshed, it could easily be refreshed. Okay, so our first coat on our walnut bowl is dry, both inside and outside. One of the things I like to do is to just kind of sand very lightly. What I've got here is about a 400 grit kind of automotive wet dry sandpaper, super slick. I like to use a pad or something. This is just a Scotch-Brite pad actually that I like to wrap in here, and this just helps me not press down too hard with my fingers or whatever. Sometimes I'll use pads like this. This is just a Festool pad. It's a 500 grit, same idea, basically just like a cushion deal. And what I like to do is just kind of run over this just very, very briefly. Actually, that's almost too big for we're going to use this pad for the bowl on the inside. It'll give us a little better, let us get all the way down in the bottom. This also gives us the opportunity a lot of times, especially if you're using a finish, sometimes you can end up with a pool of finish down here in the bottom. So this kind of gives us an opportunity to check that. All I really want to do is just kind of knock that back just a little bit, make sure it's nice and smooth all the way around, both inside and outside. Now I do this in between each coat. This takes a minute. Taking this step allows us to do is, if we have a mistake, especially where we did the outside and then came back and did the inside, sometimes right here, and I can see it here a little bit where it's gotten thick, where we sort of kind of had to run a little bit, so it kind of gives us an opportunity to fix any flaws like that. So once we've got that kind of knocked back, what I like to do is, you can use a tack cloth. Most of the time what I do is take a paper towel, break it in half, wet one side or one half, wring it out, and then I just put a dry paper towel right over it. So I'm not really using much water, but it's just damp enough that it pulls the sanding material that we just sanded off. It'll get all that dust off of there. And I do this same step the same way, whether I'm using shellac, General Finishes High Performance, when I'm spraying. I do the same thing. I usually don't show that in other videos, but I do this every time.
Now we just need to apply coats 2, 3, and 4.
Let that dry for a few minutes, and this bowl will be ready for photos on the website.